Hello, welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be the normal weekend review show for the weekend of August 24th through the 26th, 2018. I will walk through the top 10 at the box office here, and then we'll talk a little bit about some smaller films that got released, and then think about and talk about what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks at the box office. Let's dive right into this weekend. The numbers are in. Number one this weekend was Crazy Rich Asians with $25 million. An unbelievable, kind of unheard of 5.7% drop from its initial weekend. Obviously, it popped off its opening weekend. It had a weird Wednesday release, did really well for the 5-day, did well for the 3-day. The big question was, how is this going to hold? And it has held very, very well. A 5% drop like this in the summer, especially in August, from a big wide release like this, it is very, it's very abnormal. And that it just goes to show you that Crazy Rich Asians has not only been a success with its targeted demographic of Asian Americans, and also, I should say, Asian Canadians as well, because it's the domestic market we're talking about here. So it's obviously a grand slam with that demographic, and you saw that in the numbers last weekend. I think the Asian audience opening weekend was around 40%. When they only make up about 7% of the total movie-going audience in the US and Canada. So obviously they targeted it well, they marketed it well with that demographic. But the bigger story here isn't the fact that it's just like every once in a while we'll have like a smart bomb targeted movie at African Americans, at women under 25, at men over 25, or in a comic book. Like there's usually a movie that does that really well. And those movies tend to make a fair amount of money, but a movie won't be a huge breakout unless it can transcend its targeted demographic. And Warner Brothers, I think, made a very specific strategy here to say, hey, we want this to play well with the Asian American audiences, but we also want it to break out. We want it to get outside of that demographic, and we want this thing to make $100 million. And they're going to do that, and they were successful in doing that. And you can see that in the audience this weekend. Actually, in the initial weekend, it was 44% Asian American for the audience opening weekend. Now, this weekend, it was only 27%. So still massive compared to their overall sort of average in the population and in the movie-going population, but dropped significantly. White folks went from 32% last weekend to 48% of the audience this weekend. So it's transcended. It's got outside that demographic, and it's breaking out, and that's essentially what we mean by that term. And so there's a lot to say about it, and a lot of success that should be sort of congratulated with Warner Brothers and everybody involved with the film. I think it is an interesting sort of film to do so well in August, right? Because it's the doldrums, it's super quiet out. Nothing really tends to blast off in August. You usually have the first 2 weeks is movies like The Meg. I'm thinking back to when I started following the box office. It was all like really trashy action films in the first couple of weeks of August. And the last 2 weeks of August is this like dead zone where nothing happens. Everybody's going back to college. Everybody's coming back from vacation, and things don't usually pop off again until after Labor Day. Labor Day weekend, I think, is this upcoming weekend? I think it's gonna be pretty quiet, and that's par for the course usually now. So, opening this movie, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why they picked to release this movie here in the middle of August. They knew it was a unique property. They knew that, it's a rom-com that has a mostly Asian cast. So it was a little bit of a bet, just because rom-coms aren't huge anymore. They've like sort of transitioned over to Netflix and more streaming options, Lifetime or Life Channel. Lifetime? Is that the channel? Yeah, it is. So that genre has kind of shifted away from the movie theater world. So it was kind of risky on that front. And then the Asian American part of it, or the sort of the high involvement of of Asian people in this movie wasn't necessarily a bet per se, but it wasn't very common. We haven't seen that before. So it was kind of an unknown quantity, whether that would bring out more people. And Warner Brothers really, they hit a home run here. They hit a grand slam with this. And it's going to keep doing well, because this is what happens when a movie like this does so well and starts to break out and the word of mouth picks up. You know, I can't remember the age. I think the cinema score is an A for this. And so it's going to have this sort of feedback loop, right? People love it. Word of mouth is like hyped. And we can tell that with a 5% drop on a second weekend is so abnormal that I don't think this thing's going to drop more than 20% next weekend. And it's going to continue with those low, probably sub 30 drops for like the next few weekends at least. So who knows where this thing's going to go? It could have like my big fat Greek wedding sort of play where it does like a 10x multiplier, which is entirely possible. Just because this September is not that jam-packed. A lot of like horror movies and action movies, nothing really like Crazy Rich Asians. So I do think it's going to play well for the next few weekends. But you really have to sort of like hand it to everybody involved, especially at the Warner Brothers marketing, for picking this release date, marketing it in the way that they did. They've really inundated all these different platforms with the film. And it was nice because they had a big cast to pull from to sort of do promotions and stuff like that. But they really handled it well, and it's a huge win for everybody involved. So Crazy Rich Asians, we'll keep an eye on that one. It's probably, God, is there anything coming out next week? I gotta double check. Like Searching's going wide, Little Stranger Kin. Yeah, so it's probably, let's say it does at most a 50% drop. It won't. So you're looking at what, 12, 13. It's probably going to do 16, 17. It's got a good chance of winning again next weekend. So 3 weekends at number 1 would be a great feat for that movie. So also in number 2 from Warner Brothers is The Meg. It came in at $13 million this weekend. A 38% drop, which is not bad at all for a film like this. Still in 4,000 theaters. Per theater average was $3,200. Take so far on Meg is $105 million. This one's just, I wouldn't call it a grand slam like Crazy Rich Asians. The production budget was really high on this. It's listed at 130, but I hear it's like 170. It's doing well worldwide. Like it's not. The hard part here is that its success is kind of hindered by that high production cost. It's done about $408 million worldwide. It's going to be really hard to make a ton of profit just because the costs were so high going into this. Now, maybe they sort of reduced the marketing spend or found ways to cut money in different ways, but this movie should have been shot for about $40 to $50 million. And the fact that it's almost 4x that is not good. But that's the context of it. Within this specific sort of like take out that production budget, it's a really good performance for this film and very surprising. I thought this was a surefire flop for Warner Brothers. I really did. There's nothing really that seemed that hyped up, and I didn't see a lot of pull for this movie just from online and Reddit and Twitter. There just didn't seem like there's this huge sort of ironic snakes on a plane, let's go see this thing, although Snakes on a Plane also flopped. That's what I thought was going to happen here. It's like people who want to see it ironically. It's kind of a joke. Are people in on the joke? Are they going to go see the joke in theaters? And apparently they are. And I think Warner Brothers kind of turned into the skid a little bit with that and played up the comedic aspects of it, the over the topness of it. They knew they had sort of a really hammy, absurdist horror movie on their hands, kind of like a Sharknado situation, and they just said, hey, let's go for it, let's play that up, and it really worked out well for them. So it's at $400 million worldwide, with a 38% drop in its third weekend is really good. And what's happening here is that Warner Brothers owns August now. They really figured out this August. Coming up to this August, like 6 or 3 months ago, I was like, what's going to happen? Like, there's nothing coming out. It's super quiet, just like it was in 2017. Or we're going to have another box office crash like we did then. Well, we haven't, because Warner Brothers marketed these films the right way, and they picked the right release dates. I couldn't think of a better release date for The Meg, for a movie like that. It was wide open, over the top popcorn blockbuster film. And then less than a week later, they open up Crazy Rich Asians, which seemed kind of like a really targeted play, but they played it wide and went for breadth over sort of specificity with their audience, and crushed it with both movies. So thanks to Warner Brothers, August is doing pretty well, especially to last year. Okay, so that's 1 and 2. Warner Brothers with Crazy Rich Asians and The Meg. Number 3 this weekend was The Happytime Murders from STX. Just did over $10 million, $10.02 million to be exact, in 3,200 theaters. Per theater average was just over $3,000. Production budget on this was 40, but I hear it was actually 47 million according to Deadline. There is a lot we could discuss about this one. It's a failure. I think that's the way that everybody's got to see it. It did not do well. Everybody knew that it was going to be kind of a flop. The question is, how big of a flop is it? Why did it happen? All those sort of big questions. It's definitely a flop. There's no other way to view it. 40 million production budget. It's not going to have much overseas play whatsoever. This was definitely, comedies in general tend to not play as well or aren't released as wide, just because comedy is so cultural specific, and especially in a movie like this. It came in with a C- cinema score from audiences, which is awful. 2 stars on Post Track, which is also terrible. So right off the bat, we have problems. 22% in Rotten Tomatoes. We have quality problems, severe quality problems. Critics absolutely hated it. Audience who went to go see it the first couple of days also hated it. So that's going to drag down. The multiplier on this is not going to be great. I mean, the opening weekend is depressed. It's at 10 million. You could expect probably a 2x multiplier. Maybe it gets to like 20, 25, possibly. So you had a product quality problem here. You also had a pretty severe marketing issue as well. Deadline goes into a really in-depth breakdown of why this film did not open bigger. And one of the big reasons is that the marketing campaign for this was blunted in several different ways. And I won't go into all the details of that. You can go and read the Deadline recap of this weekend. It's a really good read, actually. The project has been in development for 10 years. Lionsgate had it for a while, then STX picked it up. There's been so many different stars attached to it: Jamie Foxx, Katherine Heigl, and finally Melissa McCarthy came in, and it seemed like a good fit. I think it got fast tracked because Ted did so well back in 2012. And you think puppets and rated R comedy can't go wrong, right? So the product conception, I think, initially may have made sense. But as this thing was being produced, there had to be more red flags that this was not going to do well. In terms of the marketing and promotion of it, Elizabeth Banks and Melissa McCarthy didn't show up for the promotions for this. There was no premiere. There was no appearances on any TV shows with the 2 stars in it. They posted nothing on their Instagram and Twitter about it. So there's one school of thought that it wasn't marketed appropriately. I think what really happened here is it got dumped in August, like happens. This is the dumping month. January is also a big dumping month for the movies. It got dumped by STX. They didn't spend a ton of money on television ads compared to other movies like this. None of the main stars did any promotion for it whatsoever. I can't believe they didn't mention it on their Twitter and Instagram. That blows my mind that they would be in this movie and not mention it. So essentially what happened here is, for whatever reason, STX, this thing, no one wanted to touch this movie. And I can't really necessarily figure out why. Maybe they knew really early on that it wasn't good, or the director and editor or whatever just didn't know what they were doing. The product quality was so terrible they just wanted to get rid of it. That's a distinct possibility here. But that confuses me even more. It's like, it seems like a movie where, because you have a lot of puppetry and stuff like that, you can go back and do reshoots. You can really edit it in a lot of different ways. I am surprised that they didn't massage this into a better movie. And I'm surprised that McCarthy and Banks didn't do any sort of promotion for it whatsoever. It's really it was a bizarre film, number one, and its release is even more bizarre, and its performance is kind of on track with that bizarreness. Like, it just, who greenlit this movie? Why did they do it? There's so many weird questions about how this movie got made, and I think right when the trailer dropped, it became apparent that something wrong had happened, because it felt so strange and off. Who is this movie for? It's like a takeoff of noir films with puppets that is gratuitous with sex and violence. So your under 25s are mostly out on that, but it's puppets, so it's going to be what? Your biggest audience is probably going to be males over 25, and that's like 39% of the audience or something like that. That's who showed up to see this. But how excited are they going to be about a movie like this? And Deadline goes into comps like Sausage Party. They talk about a lot as a comparable film to this, which makes sense. That was a computer animated film with these sort of cheery food characters. That was a super, super hard R. It's about hard of an R as you can get with animation. And Happytime seemed to be sort of a spiritual successor to that on some level, using a children's platform to tell a very adult story. But I think, when I do my sort of quick postmortem, when I think about product conception, product quality, marketing quality, and marketing quantity, this has a couple of red flags. The quality's terrible. One huge red flag. They didn't do a good job in this film. They didn't write it well. They didn't produce it well. They didn't shoot it well. Whatever. It's terrible. 1. 2, product conception may have made sense 10 years ago, may have made sense even 6 years ago when Ted came out, but you would have had to complete it by 2013, 2014 to have it really hit during that sort of time period to sort of ride the coattails of Ted. It's much too late now. Look what Ted 2 did terrible. Had an awful multiplier, as I remember. So the timing's completely passed on the product conception here. So even within the product category, we have 2 major red flags. The conception was too little too late, and the product quality was terrible. Then you look at the marketing side of things, I've covered this a little bit. The quality was okay, but there just wasn't enough of it. And if you can't get the stars of the movie to even talk about the film or acknowledge that it exists, you're in a really shitty situation. And that's essentially what happened here. It was kind of the perfect storm of terribleness, bad product and bad marketing. And so, and that doesn't surprise me that much from SDX. As much as like I'm excited about new studios coming about and doing things that are different, SDX is a new studio with a lot of money that is doing things pretty poorly compared to the majors. And like, I will shit on Warner Brothers all day long, especially their editing style. And they have this crazy in-house editing style. Watch a Warner Brothers movie from like the mid 90s or late 90s, and it looks like it's from like 1975. It blows my mind how they hired these people to do these movies. Awful look. But as much as I will criticize the major studios, SDX is a studio that is trying to do new things. They're trying to build out these mid-tier movies, like let's say production budgets from like 20 to 60 or 20 to 80 in that range. And I applaud those efforts. They just have not put out a lot of quality movies. And there's another SDX movie on this list that we'll get to that I can rack on them further for. So Happytime Murders, I say all this negative stuff about it. $10 million is not the end of the world for an opening. Domestic run of 25-ish. Won't be the worst performance ever. If this came in at like 6 or 7, then it would be like, oh my God, like this is a huge, terrible flop. But put that all into context, everything I just said, $10 million for opening weekend is not the worst thing I've ever seen in the world. So not a great performance, definitely a flop, but not the end of the world for SDX and Happytime Murders. Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4 is Mission Impossible Fallout. Great 25% drop, came in at $8 million, 3,000 theaters per theater average, and its 5th weekend is $2,600. Not too bad at all. Total take so far for Fallout is $193 million here domestically. This one's doing really well. It's going to be the best in the series in terms of aggregate money. Now, just for inflation, probably a different story. But it will be the best officially. Worldwide, it's done $538 million. So it's a good performance. The production budget was very high. This is kind of feels almost a little bit similar to Meg, where going into these movies coming out, the expectation were sort of really its actual performance exceeded those sort of contextual expectations. But when you look at the broader, bigger picture in terms of production budget, both of these films are doing quite well, but they're not going to print money in terms of profit just because production budgets were super high. 178 for this. It looks $178 million produced when you go see it. But it, $538 million versus that. Like, let's do some back of the math, napkin math really quick. 178 production cost with a marketing campaign that I know that this one probably had. You're looking at what? At least $500 million to release this film on every single platform throughout the world, all the way through the TV, paid TV, and basic cable deals. So 538 is what it's taken so far. It's not even probably... It's gonna be on that borderline of like breaking even to a little bit of profit. Now, if it has a lot more worldwide box office to do, and I don't know if it does or not, then it'll easily make up that money. But as it stands right now, it's kind of in the small profit break even territory is what I'm seeing. And that's just because the production budget was so high, and it's a worldwide release with a massive marketing campaign. Those things cost tens of millions of dollars to do. I think the average worldwide, like super wide release film, marketing alone, worldwide cost, you're looking at like 130, 140. And that sometimes dwarfs the production budgets of these films. So that's one thing to consider. So a good performance for Mission Impossible. It continues to do well. And it's breaking into that profitability category right now. But it's not like a grand slam like Crazy Rich Asians, which is that will print money for Warner Brothers. I think Mission Impossible will do kind of break even profit, but it's not going to make $200-300 million in profit. I don't see that happening. Okay, number 5 was Disney's Christopher Robin. I forgot this movie was out. 6.3 million. Really good drops this weekend. 28% drop, which is surprising because it's usually a quieter weekend. Every school in the world, every college went back to school last week. So I'm surprised that like everything dropped so low. 28% drop, 6.3 million for Christopher Robin. Total take so far is 77.6 million. That's a pretty quiet 77.6 million that it's made. I thought this movie was going to take off and do really well because it was Disney, but it just had a really weird marketing campaign and weird conception from the start. You couldn't tell if it was like an adult film or children's film. It was like, what is this? It's like a sad, morose drama. $1,800 or $1,900 per theater this weekend, so it's dropped below that 2,000 mark, so it will start to make a pretty hasty exit here from the multiplex. Number 6 was another SDX film on the list, Mile 22, from Peter Berg and Mark Wahlberg. Their partnership continues, and it continues to fail. $6 million in its second weekend, a 56% drop in its second weekend. I'm looking at drops this weekend. Nothing is really over 40%. And this is at 56%. That is a terrible sign. I talked a lot about Peter Berg last show. I don't want to go into it that much anymore. Per theater average was $1,700 in its second weekend. Production budget was $50. This felt like it was dumped by SDX as well. They dumped Happytime Murders. They dumped Mile 22. This one just had no bite to it whatsoever. It looked like a lame action movie, stupid name. The marketing was really boring. I watched a little, some of it, and I'm not into it. It doesn't look like a high quality product with a unique voice. And that's sort of what you get from Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg. Like the last few movies they've done, everything is basically flopped because he's lost his edge or something. Speaking of Berg, he's not making anything interesting anymore, and he still gets paychecks to do this, and he gets studios to give him money, and it's sad because like I don't see how he's gonna recover from this. He better have another really good movie under his sleeve, or this will be like 5 flops in a row, and Hollywood only gives you so many chances, and then you're gone forever. So he can always produce like he usually does. So terrible performance from Mile 22 overall. That's not making any money. That's going to be a loss for SDX, who's had a lot of losses this year. They really need to figure their shit out over there. Number 7 was Alpha, from Studio 8 and Sony, I believe. 5.6 million, 45% drop. $2,000 per theater average. It's made $20.1 million so far on a $51 million production budget. This is a dump, an August dump. There was no audience for this film whatsoever. Didn't really make any sense to make this film. They went through with it in a $50 million production budget. It just a terrible idea from the start, and its performance sort of speaks to that. Number 8 was BlacKkKlansman from Focus Features, $5.3 million, 27% drop this weekend. Per theater average was $2,800. Total gross so far for BlacKkKlansman from Focus, $32 million in its third weekend. This performance is kind of hard to judge. $15 million production budget is Spike Lee, so I thought this was going to do better. It seemed like it had a lot of buzz. It was coming out in the quiet August, like had a lot of room. Why didn't this perform like Crazy Rich Asians or anything like that? No, Focus is different than Warner Brothers, of course. And it definitely had a little bit more, or probably a lot more arty edge to it. But I just felt like this movie coming out now was like perfect timing, perfect director, had so much sort of hype going for it, and it just didn't really take off like I thought it would. Now, $32 million by the third weekend is not bad, especially with a production budget that was only 15. But I was thinking like it would open a lot higher than this and be well on its way to $40 or $50 million by now. But it's had a little bit of a muted response. Not a flop per se, but just didn't develop like I thought it was going to. Number 9 was a new release, A.X.L, from Global Road, which technically no longer exists as of like this last week. $2.9 million for A.X.L. This one was dumped. It was basically a contractual obligation to release it. So Global Road is an offshoot of Open Road, which I think like went bankrupt or something and then got bought out. Now Global Road is trying to raise $200 million. They couldn't do it. So literally last week, Global Road is now in the hands of the two banks that are seeking to sell off the film's assets. Bank of America and East West Bank now own this studio because they gave them the loans. You couldn't pay the loans, and so they take over your property. And so that's what's happening here. They got repoed. So Global Road Entertainment no longer exists in any sort of actual form, and A.X.L is the last movie they will ever put out. How sad an ending. They were only around for a year, and sure, Open Road was like, it was an offshoot of Open Road, which I always thought was a terrible studio and didn't really do anything interesting. I think they were originally intended to do VOD films, but for some reason only, and then for some reason they started to release films in the theaters, and it just did not work at all. So A.X.L is their swan song. So number 10 this weekend was Slender Man, and its third weekend did $2.785 million, just about $2.8 million, 42% drop. Per theater average is a terrible $13.50 in its third weekend. Total take so far for Slender Man is $25 million on a $10 million budget. This one's from Sony Gems. They're kind of like genre, lowbrow imprint of Sony. This one's, I don't know. It's not a terrible performance, I guess. $25 million on a $10 million budget. I'm sure they did not spend a ton of money on the advertising for this. So I think it's probably break even, maybe a little bit of a profit for them once it gets to VOD and streaming, and they'll probably like sell it to Shudder or something like that for whatever they sell it for, $500K or something like that. I'm not sure what those deals cost. But it's not, there's nothing to speak home about. It's one of those genre films that has done okay. Outside the top 10, just a quick recap on the top 10, like what's done well. The standouts are Crazy Rich Asians, really success story right now of August, and The Meg as well. The flops of Happytime Murders, Mile 22, and A.X.L kind of speak to how the studio system is all over the place. The newer people who are trying to come up, like SDX and Global Road, just can't compete. And I don't know if that's going to continue to be the case for a while, but I hope smaller studios like A24 and Neon and Roadside Attractions and Annapurna, I hope that they're able to sort of create a unique voice in the industry and be successful for a long time. I do not want them going the route of Global Road. And unfortunately, SDX, I guess they're going to stick around for a long time. Like, I don't know. They got to do a better job, because if they're losing money on all these movies, that's going to add up real quick. The one limited feature that I wanted to talk about pretty quickly was Searching. This is sort of my little movie that could for the late summer season. It opened up on 9 theaters this weekend, did $40K per theater, which is pretty good. Usually $40K on like 4 theaters is like pretty decent, but on 9 theaters, that is something to sort of take note of. The real test is when it expands next weekend. It's also from Sony Gens like Slender Man. So Searching is one of those social media kind of thriller things. It's, I think, a father searching for his daughter through social media and Facebook, and it's sort of like a noir investigation thriller thing. I've heard fantastic stuff about it. I really like John Cho, who's the lead, and really kind of owns the film. I feel like it's going to do pretty well. I can't really read that much into the 9 theaters at $40K per, just because it's just too small. If it was like 4 theaters and it did like $65K or $70K, which maybe this translates to, then I would get really excited about it. I can't really read much in a 9 theater $40K per opening. It is good though. It's not flopping yet or anything like that in its initial sort of launch here. But I really hope it takes off because I think it looks like a great movie, and I think it. The only thing that really runs against it is its genre of being that social media thriller thing, which I guess is like kind of played out already with Unfriended 1 and 2. I think there's 2 of those, and there's like another one. So it's kind of like a little bit of a tired concept, but I think they play it well enough that it might break out. I hope it does. It's sort of my pick for this time of year to do really well. That's all the really limited stuff I wanted to talk about. There's not too much else out. I guess the other thing is to note is 8th Grade is starting to sort of come down now from its release. It's in its 7th weekend. Did 400, almost 500K this weekend for A24. It's starting to lose theaters, lost 176 theaters. Per theater average is $1,200 per theater. Total take so far for 8th Grade is 12.5 million essentially. So this is one of the ones I did a long diatribe about this, but I wanted to say that I was right. It's basically what I wanted to say. 8th Grade did have a chance to break out into mass release, and because it's an art film, and to be an art film and sort of break out is a very, very difficult struggle, and very few films are able to do it. I thought 8th Grade had a chance of doing it, and it started out really, really strong, but you could tell by the 3rd or 4th weekend as it expanded wide that it wasn't going to happen. And you can tell right away when it hits that 1,000 theater mark and the per theater average starts to drop like a rock, you just know that that's not going to break out. So it's done quite well for an indie flick art film, but it did not transition into a wide release hit, unfortunately, despite its amazing quality. So I haven't seen it yet. Won't You Be My Neighbor, though, sitting at $22 million for Focus Features. That is the Mr. Rogers documentary. Really fantastic performance. It's the year of the documentary. Documentaries are coming back. And keep note that Fahrenheit 11/9 is coming out this year. So I think it's going to be a special year for documentaries in terms of their performance. Okay, so that's it for this weekend. Let's talk briefly about what's coming up. Searching's going wide this weekend. Kin is coming out. That's not going to do anything. Little Strangers coming out. That's not going to do anything. Operation Finale comes out on Wednesday, so in a few days. That's going to do less than nothing. The trailer looks good, but like I'm looking at all these films. The only one that probably deserves to be in the theater is probably Searching. And that's the only one. These other ones, they're like Operation Finale streaming film, HBO. Kin sounds like would be a really cool Netflix premiere. Little Strangers, an art flick, premiered on Filmstruck. Like the industry needs to transition over to streaming. Like this is getting tired and boring. Like these films do not belong in a theater. Okay, I'll preface that in saying they don't belong as wide release films. Like I could see Little Stranger doing well. Just do Our House. Just do the Our House for like a month and then put it on VOD and stream it out. Like that seems like the best strategy these days. Operation Valley, same thing. I might even go see that movie. It was at like a local art house for like $6. I'm not going to pay $15 to see it at the fucking AMC. Hell no. Because I know it's going to be on VOD in like 2 months anyway. So no point. Searching though, I think can do quite well, and I hope it does take off. And that's that weekend. There's a lot of small stuff coming out next weekend too. Then we transition out of summer, officially post Labor Day. We have The Nun coming out. We have Peppermint coming out. And then the week after, September 14th, we have The Predator. We have A Simple Favor. We have White Boy Rick, which looks like an interesting film. I don't think it's going to do very well. And over the next couple of weeks, what do I see happening? I really do hope Searching breaks out, but I'm kind of like, there's a doubt in my stomach that it's not going to. Kind of my gut says like, I don't know. It's a really tough weekend to do well. And I think the social media aspect of it might really hurt it. So I hope that it breaks out, but I'm not like betting $1 million on it. And then that next weekend with The Nun and Peppermint, I think The Nun's going to do fantastic. I see The Nun doing over $40 million opening weekend. It's tracking 32 to 38 right now. I'm thinking over 40. It's just like, it's the perfect timing. It's the new horror weekend that's been established by it. It's got everything going for it. It's got the Conjuring series to back it up now. Conjuring 1, 2, Annabelle 1, 2, all leading up to The Nun. I think that's going to get butts in the seats. It's going to get people excited about it. So I'm really bullish on The Nun doing quite well. Peppermint's a non-issue. It's not going to do anything. I don't know why it's listed at $30 a share on Hollywood Stock Exchange. I don't know what these people are thinking. There's no way it's going to do anywhere near that. And then in terms of The Predator, Simple Favor, and White Boy Rick, A Simple Favor looks interesting. Blake Lively, Anna Kendrick. I think it's based on a novel. This is Jason Wright. Is this Jason? No, Paul Feig. Sorry, Paul Feig's directing this one. Lionsgate's like the old. Lionsgate reminds me of what SDX is now. Like, it's just like it used to be that new studio on the block that kind of like did schlocky, genre-y films. And so with this one, it kind of has that similar feel. I've seen no trailer for it whatsoever. I have no idea what it's about. I'm actually going to watch the teaser trailer here in a second because I'm interested. But I've heard no buzz, and maybe it's really good and it'll break out because it's Paul Feig, but like, I doubt it. And I think The Predator is the other big movie in the next couple of weeks. I have no clue what The Predator is going to do. I couldn't even begin to guess. $30 million, $40 million. Does it break out and do 50 or 60? Does it do higher than that? Does it do like 15? I couldn't tell you, but I'm kind of saying in the 30-ish range, I think right now for The Predator. Really depends on quality. Which I don't think it's very good, but like, it's Sean Black, so it's like you never know. But it just doesn't feel like, it just feels like, why are we doing this? Why is this coming out? I don't know. This feels already feels kind of dated for some reason, the concept. So that's the next couple of weeks, guys. I will probably be back. I'll be back next weekend. And if not, I might do like a sort of midweek show if I'm up for it. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.